Welcome to Fantasy Football Today Dynasty. I am your host, Heath Cummings, and it is a one-man mailbag today. I've got questions from emails. I've got questions from Twitter. I've got questions from Blue Sky, questions from all over the place about rookies, about vets, about rebuilds, about winning championships. Love it when you guys send in your questions. And I just want to remind you here at the top of the show, if you email us at fantasyfootball@cbsi.com, if you put Dynasty in the subject, then Adam Azer will forward that to me. Now, I will say I was off at the end of last week. If Adam answered a couple of these questions on the main FFT, well, you didn't hear what I thought about them. So you are going to hear today. I want to get started right away with, I had 3 emails that from last week or the week before that I hadn't got to yet. So I thought Jake's question was really good. Safe quarterbacks to pair with Anthony Richardson. He said, I'm in a good place to make a run for it this year, but my quarterbacks are all risky, high ceiling, low floor guys. I'd like to keep Anthony Richardson. I also have Sam Darnold and Michael Penix. Who is a good QB for me to target in a trade? The rebuilding teams are most likely to trade. Their QBs are Mayfield, Stroud, Lawrence, Nix, and Mahomes, but open to other options as well. Thank you, Jake, for the question, and I think it's a good one. I talk about this sometimes when I'm putting the quarterback rankings out. And just as a reminder, last week we updated quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end rankings on the site. We also updated trade charts for both 1QB and Superflex leagues over on Sportsline. So all that new data all that new information is out there. I'll actually be posting a new 2025 Dynasty landing page this week, so it will be easier to find all of that information. But Jake makes a good point. If you have Anthony Richardson, you need a safer option as well. The first name that comes to my mind, I mean, first off, from the list that you sent, Baker Mayfield makes a lot of sense to me. I don't think Baker is going anywhere anytime soon in Tampa Bay. I don't think the offensive coordinator change is going to have a huge negative impact on him. It sounds like Tampa Bay, they've pushed back a couple of deadlines with Chris Godwin. They may be trying to keep Chris Godwin around. Baker should be a high-end QB2 at worst. He could be a low-end QB1. And his costs, because of his history and because of his age, may be a little bit easier to stomach. One guy who I have one spot ahead of Baker in my rankings that wasn't on your list is Dak Prescott. I actually think Dak has a higher ceiling than Baker does. I think Dak's floor is pretty safe as well, as long as he stays healthy. And so I might just go see. He's definitely a guy, Dak, whose value has fallen as of late. You might be able to buy low there. The guy just above Dak in my most recent rankings at QB 16 is Jared Goff. Probably on a Contender's roster, but if he's not, maybe go see a Jared Goff, Anthony Richardson combo I would like a lot. Also, it's possible that Sam Darnold signs a contract in the next month that makes him seem quite a bit safer. Kevin sent in an email with 2 questions, one about tight end premium, one about the rookie draft. So he's in a half PPR league with a half PPR bonus for tight ends. And you want to know if this increase matters more than a full PPR league where it's 1.5 for tight ends. And yes, the math says it does, Kevin, but I think the more important factor is that it's a much bigger difference for the elite tight ends. I'm not so sure that it really makes the mid or low end tight ends any more valuable at all. So I would bump Brock Bowers up a little bit. I would bump Trey McBride up a little bit. I'd probably bump Sam Laporta and maybe George Kittle up a little bit. But the rest of those guys, TJ Hawkinson's one who maybe should be bumped up that we haven't talked about enough. But it's really a top 5 boost. He also asked, are there any landing spots or players who you think will be true difference makers? I'll be really interested in who the Chargers add at tight end. And my favorite rookie in terms of upside right now is Harold Fannin. So those would be my 2 answers to that. And then he says, given how bad my running backs are, do you think it makes sense, given the depth of this class, to just restock and take a chance on up to 4 of those guys with my early picks? Yes. I'd probably, because the email came in, I don't read all the context because some of these emails do get a little bit longer, but the email came in from a guy who was kind of weak at running back, kind of weak at tight end, and he did have some extra draft picks. I'd probably be looking to draft 3 of these running backs The way I view it is Ashton Genty is the surefire thing. There's a tier of 4 backs after that I think 2 or 3 of them hit probably. And then I think we get 2 or 3 starters from the rest of the class. So I'd probably draft at least 3 running backs in this class, go get 1 tight end. Think you will feel a lot better about your team going into 2025. Braden asks a question about off-season trading. I'm sure it's a fluid situation as always, but what is your general rule of thumb for off-season trades in Dynasty? Do you typically wait until after the NFL draft to trade players and or picks, or do you prefer to make a trade before the NFL draft? I'll just say I don't know that I have a strong preference. I think these rookie picks are in a period of time right now where they're about as valuable as they're going to be. That increases as we get closer to the rookie draft. So you can kind of count on rookie picks throughout this time of year just increasing in value. So it might be cheaper to trade for one right now. I'd be less likely to trade a rookie pick away right now. Although I will say this can be, if you're a true contender, a really good time to buy cheap on vets. Teams that have decided, you know what, I need to move into a rebuild. I want to acquire rookie picks. They will be more likely to give away those vets for a little bit less. I'm not paying full price for any older players, but I was able to trade, I think, a first and a second last offseason for a package that included Derrick Henry and Devontae Adams. And yes, I won that league this year. And so that's the type of thing that I'd be looking to do is like, can I throw together 1 or 2 of my rookie picks that probably aren't that great anyway, and add maybe 3 or 4 guys that might generally all cost you first and second round rookie picks. This is a good time to try to buy vets at a discount, but it has to be a discount. I'm not interested in paying full price for any veterans at this time of year. We have a question from the chat, and it's a good time to mention that at the end of this show, I will be taking as many questions from the chat as I can get to. If you're watching on Twitter and you ask a question on that platform, I'm not going to see it. Come on over to YouTube, jump in the chat, ask a question there. I will get to as many as I can. And we had one from Nathan. How are we feeling about Jalen Coker? I don't think Panthers are going to draft Tet, and free agent wide receivers aren't looking great without T and Godwin. I think Coker should be a pretty good buy low right now. I'd be a little bit careful assuming that if the Panthers don't do something, that means he's automatically got a great role. I'm kind of expecting we're going to see Adam Thielen back there. It's possible Liggett takes a big step forward. So yes, if you can buy low, and by buy low, I mean a late second or third round pick, I absolutely love that idea. He's definitely a guy that I am stashing and not dropping to make room for rookie picks. Let's take a short break, then we'll get to your tweets. We'll get to your questions from Blue Sky. We'll get to your YouTube chat questions right after this.
Yeah, we always find our way back home.
We did have a few tweets. I put out the call this morning for mailbag questions, and Adam asked, how do you value Rashee Rice going into 2025? Worthy's emergence, looming suspension, injury recovery. What are your ideal? Then he had another question, I guess. There's a 2-question tweet, Adam. Let's get to the first one, because I know we already had Choff in the chat asking the same question. Why is everyone so ready to rank Rashee Rice so high? And I think you just have to look at like his game log in the last 10 games that we've seen him play for the Chiefs. He doesn't look like a number 1 wide receiver. He looks like an elite number 1 wide receiver. He was an 8 to 10 target per game guy. He's tied to Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, we talk about that all the time. He's averaged 9.4 yards per target in his first 131 targets in the NFL. So you have to factor that upside in. But I do agree that there's maybe more risk than most people see. I, in Dynasty, actually have Worthy in the most recent rankings update at wide receiver 17, Rice at wide receiver 18. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty still, which is the only reason that Rice is not ranked as a top 10 wide receiver. But the reason he's still ranked so high is because there's a possibility that he shows up week 1 next year and he's just a top 5 wide receiver, and he's 25 years old and he's tied to Patrick Mahomes. So you can't you can't just completely bury him because of the injury concerns. You can't just completely bury him because of the suspension concerns, which are probably, we think, like a 4 to 6 game variety of a suspension. I don't think we're going to lose Rashee Rice for an entire season or anything. Another question from Twitter: 12-team Superflex PPR. Do you trade Breece Hall for Drake Maye? And I will admit, when my first thought on this was, I don't really think that I want to. I went and looked at the Superflex trade chart. Drake Maye comes in at a value at 30.2, Breece Hall at 25.4. So the trade chart says, yes, I absolutely would. It's hard to overestimate the value of a good starting quarterback. And I think there's a chance that the Patriots make a significant addition in the next 2 or 3 months at wide receiver, and Drake Maye's value is even higher than it is right now. I love Breece Hall as a running back. I still think he has the potential in any given season to be the number one running back, but the offense looks pretty terrible in New York. Braylon Allen exists and could be a problem. And so I think you have to cool the jets on Hall just a little bit. He's actually ranked just behind Kyren Williams in my running back rankings. And so I would trade Hall for Drake Maye. One more question from Colin. He says, my general question is, how do you balance planning for the future versus win now when you just won a championship? The specific version is, do I trade Saquon and A.J. Brown away after winning a chip to try to get younger? I might have the wrong approach here, but this is my opinion. If I just won a championship, man, I'm doing just about everything to try to go win a second one. And if I've just won 2, I'm doing just about everything to go win a third one. Like, this is the game's called Dynasty. If I get an opportunity to build something you could truly call the Dynasty in this league, I kind of feel like I've done it. I won the league. I accomplished the mission. Flags fly forever. We'll rebuild and figure everything else out in the future. So I'm probably not dealing Saquon and A.J. Brown right after I won a championship. I'm probably trying to run it back and go win another one. But there are exceptions to that rule. Like, if you think you can get a package that won't be a downgrade for this year and you can get younger, and that is, you can accomplish that sometimes, especially maybe with a guy like A.J. Brown who still has a couple of years left, and you want to make that wager that you can go get a 24-year-old that's not going to be that much different from A.J. Brown this year and get a little bit younger. I think that makes sense. I don't have a problem with it. I'm just not trading those guys for picks, most likely. I'm trading those guys for guys who can still help me win a championship this year. We had a few questions over on Blue Sky as well. One of the first ones, what are we doing with Trey Benson? Buy, sell, or hold? These questions are always so dependent on, like, I'd like to buy Trey Benson, but how much does the guy who has him on his roster think he's worth? I'd be okay with selling him if somebody liked him a lot more than I did. I've currently got him valued as RB 31 in Dynasty. That is just ahead of Najee Harris, just ahead of Brian Robinson, just ahead of someone like Tyrone Tracy or Tyjae Spears, still behind some guys who could be big losers this offseason, but Isaiah Pacheco, Tony Pollard, Ramondre Stevenson. I think that there is an opportunity if as soon, it's kind of like the Trey McBride situation. We saw a year of Trey McBride behind Zach Ertz as a rookie, and he really didn't do anything at all. And then unfortunately, Arizona decided to keep Zach Ertz around. And so he went into year 2 with Trey McBride, and some people were really down on him because when is he going to get the chance? Well, it took 6 or 7 weeks. Zach Ertz got hurt, and Trey McBride has been a stud ever since. I think it'll be the same thing with Benson. Like, once something happens with James Conner, I think we'll see Benson not in a full workhorse role. They'll split the touches a little bit, but in a role that produces, at the very worst, high-end RB2 production. So if you can buy Trey Benson, even if, like, especially if you're in, like, really wanting to get younger, I think you try to trade Pollard or Stevenson or one of those older backs for him and maybe try to get something extra. I'd be closer to a buy than a sell or a hold when it comes to Trey Benson. Leaf asks, pre-NFL draft 2025 rookie rankings, Do you see a clear teardrop at this point? And if so, where? I am actually putting together my pre-combine top 12 rookie rankings. And so that will be out on the site over at CBS before the combine starts, because it's called pre-combine, right? So probably Wednesday night, maybe Thursday morning. But I would say that, yes, I see several tiers. But the first one starts right after the 101. For me, Ashton Genty is just heads and shoulders above the rest. That next tier is probably going to be 1 or 2 wide receivers and 4 running backs. If we're talking about a 1 QB draft, Cam Ward probably gets into that second tier as well. So maybe you're getting into around the 106 or 107 for tier 2, and then pretty flat after that. So a tier right at the top at 101, it would cost a lot if I had the 101 to drop down to say a 103 or a 104. But then 102 through 106 maybe is another tier. And then after that, it's a little flatter in the back half of the first round. DJ is a commissioner. He has an orphan team due to lack of activity. The team is so good from the startup that it actually won in 2023 the championship with players on a bye in the lineup. That's kind of embarrassing, isn't it, DJ? I'm not sure I told everybody that. Do I give a new manager to the league a playoff team, or start with the worst team and see if they want the better team? If you've got one orphan team, what else are you going to do? Are you going to give that team to yourself? You're going to give that team to some? I would give the team, like, if somebody wants to come into the league, this is a great opportunity. A lot of times it's hard to fill these openings because people leave the league and maybe they've traded away their future picks, or maybe they just have a really terrible roster and that's why they're leaving. If you have the opportunity to actually add a new manager, you can be a little more selective with who you're adding to your league because they've got a team where they can walk in and compete right away. I'd be pretty happy to have that situation as a commissioner. It's generally the other way around. You are struggling to find team managers that want to take over just the terrible teams that have been left behind. I will say one way to combat that we have talked about on this show quite a bit. I've still not gotten very good at doing it in my own leagues, but just collect 2 years up front. When you do the startup, collect 2 years entry fees, and then collect 1 year every year after that. So there's always 1 year sitting there that when you need to add a new manager, you need somebody to take over a terrible team, you can give them that first year for free. They only have to pay for the year in advance. And that will make it a little bit easier to fill those really bad teams. Kyle asks, how are you treating the regular RB2s and 3s prior to the draft? Should I be selling Brian Robinson, Tyrone Tracy, Jalen Warren, DeAndre Swift before their teams draft a rookie running back and the value falls? Would you take Brian Robinson or the 203 in a 1 quarterback league? That one would probably depend. Like, I think that's probably fair. Brian Robinson for 203. I would much rather have the 203 if I was in a rebuilding period. I'd probably lean ever so slightly to Brian Robinson when it comes to a team that I'm trying to win now. But I will say, as a rule, yes, I think if you're nervous about your running back at all, you should be seeing if you can sell them. But if, again, on the other side of that, I generally advise to people, don't pay full price for a vet this time of year. So you may not get a very good offer. I would also say I'm not sure it's just regular RB2s and RB3s. When I look at my Dynasty running back rankings, like Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane, Kyron Williams, Breece Hall, Jonathan Taylor, I'm not really concerned about those guys. Saquon Barkley is RB7 for me in the Dynasty rankings. I don't really have any concern anything bad's going to happen for him in the next 2 or 3 months. But then listen to the names that round out the top 12. Chase Brown, we might feel great about him as a top 12 Dynasty running back in 2 months. We might have big time concerns. Bucky Irving, same thing. Ken Walker, he's got Zach Charbonnet on the team. Now, the coaching staff sounds like they really want Walker to be their lead back, but there's concerns there. Josh Jacobs is probably pretty safe as RB11. James Cook at RB12, other than the fact that it sounds like he wants a whole lot more money than teams generally spend on running backs, I think he's pretty safe as well. But what my point is, Like, I think you get into the danger zone at running back as early as RB8 in the rankings. And that's also reflected in the fact that I expect once Ashton Jeanty is drafted, he's going to come in at RB3 in my dynasty running back rankings. I think Travion Henderson is probably ahead of Chase Brown at RB8. He's probably a top 8 or 9 dynasty running back as well. There's a chance there's as many as 4 rookie running backs from this class that jump into my top 12. And they might do so by knocking some of the guys currently in the top 20 just all the way out of there. I think some of the names that he gave are good examples of the more obvious guys who could lose value: Robinson, Tracy, Warren, and Swift. But there's a lot of guys also that have quite a bit of dynasty value right now who could see their value really crushed by the time we get through the NFL draft. We have plenty of time for your questions from the chat. I've been talking too fast. We got through a lot of Blue Sky, Twitter, and email questions, and now we've got Thomas's start up some of your questions for me in the chat. Thank you, Thomas. We'll start with M. Should I trade Kyle Pitts for a high third pick? Listen, it's tough out there. I understand. He's fallen all the way to tight end 11 in my dynasty rankings. I can't do that. I still believe, and I held on to Noah Fant for too long. He never did anything near as good as Kyle Pitts. I still believe that there's too much upside. There's too much athleticism. There's too much potential ability to let Kyle Pitts go for anything close to an early third round rookie pick. I probably am going to continue to feel that way until he gets to free agency and gets an opportunity to kind of choose the spot where another team wants him. And if he continues to fail at that spot, then maybe, at that point, his value is pretty much gone. But if you're getting a third round rookie pick, that's not much value anyways. Ryan it looks like a grade the trade. I traded, would you trade Gibbs for 101 and 108 in a 14-team league? Still has Bijan, Pacheco, and a few backups. Wow. So I would. I don't know that there's actually going to be that much difference between Jahmyr Gibbs and Ashton Jeanty in terms of my dynasty value rankings. And I certainly think that the 108 is going to be enough to make up for that value. I might have a harder time doing it if I thought, and listen, you got Bijan and Gibbs. Maybe you're just in a position where you're really a true contender, and that doesn't feel quite as good because you're not sure Jeanty as a rookie will be able to match Gibbs and you want to win this year. But in terms of just dynasty value, I think 101 and 108 is absolutely enough, especially in a 14-team league. A good thing to remember, the deeper the league is, the more like those extra picks matter. The more the 2-for-1 deals are a little bit more okay. I really hate those trades in a 10-team league because you're not even starting that many guys. But if you got a 14-team league where you're starting 8 to 10 players on a given week, then man, the 108 might be a really valuable piece. Got another question here from the chat. MD, my core players are Jaden Daniels, Devon Achane, Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey. That's a pretty good start. Justin Jefferson, Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas Jr. Holy cow. I traded my 2025 first and second and Bucky for Christian McCaffrey. Do I hold fast or try and get a younger running back? Yeah, I don't love that trade. This is a true contender, obviously, just from we heard the players that I just read there. But I actually in my dynasty rankings have Bucky ranked higher than Christian McCaffrey. I think there's a chance that Bucky's better next year. There's a chance that Christian McCaffrey's value is one injury away from going to zero. Now, again, we get to the NFL draft. Tampa Bay could draft a running back, which I don't think they're going to, and Bucky's value could suffer. But as of right now, I'd rather have Bucky than McCaffrey, so I don't like giving up those picks also. If you could, it's going to be hard to now deal McCaffrey for a younger back, but I would like to, yes. How are you approaching Chris Olave with the concussions? Chris Olave is currently my wide receiver 23 in Dynasty. That's right behind Devontae Smith, Jamison Williams, and Zay Flowers, right ahead of George Pickens, DK Metcalf, and Jalen Waddle. I don't know that I'm actually factoring the concussions in all that much. I think obviously if we get to next year and it's a problem again, then we've got real reasons to have concern. But as of right now, I'm just kind of viewing him as a guy that probably has a couple of borderline wide receiver 1 seasons, has several borderline wide receiver 2 seasons left in him. Very similar to a Terry McLaurin. Hopefully you get that spike season soon where he scores a bunch of touchdowns so he looks like an elite producer. But unless like a lot of things have to change in New Orleans for me to really feel good about Chris Olave as a top 12 dynasty guy, which is where he was for most of the last 2 or 3 years. Does Brock Bowers become tight end 1 if they get an average starting quarterback? So for dynasty purposes, Brock Bowers is my tight end 1. For 2025 projections purposes, Brock Bowers is my tight end 1. And I don't know what they're going to do at quarterback, but I don't think it's going to be worse than it was last year. So yes, Brock Bowers is the tight end 1 pretty much in all formats. Jordan, 12-team, half PPR, half point per first down. That's got a lot of players, a lot of wide receivers. Brian Thomas Jr., JSN, Rice, Odunze, Shakir. Also has Jennings. Good grief. All these wide receivers. Who would you sell? Who deserves a bump up or down? Looking at the roster, I think Khalil Shakir is the one guy who stands out to me, and maybe Chris Godwin, that I kind of view as sells relative to their dynasty value. I'm not sure the situation ever gets a whole lot better than it was this year for Khalil Shakir, and he wasn't a real needle mover. I'm pretty concerned about Chris Godwin's health and his explosiveness after the variety of injuries that he's had, and we still don't know for sure where he's going to be playing in 2025. So if I was selling a couple of these wide receivers, because you do have a bunch of them, I would probably, I'd love it if I could combine Shakir and Godwin and turn them into a better player. But I'd also be fine. Those are the types of guys you might be able to use to go get yourself a starting running back if that's where you're weak this year, or to make an upgrade at quarterback or tight end. Got a couple of questions left. I was just sent a trade offer in a PPR Dynasty Superflex 3 wide receiver league. I give up Odunze, a 2025, the 5th pick in the second round of 2025, and a 2026 first for Drake London, a 2026 second, and a 2025 third. So looking at this, you're basically moving down from 205 to 303 this year. And you're moving down from a first to a second next year, and you're upgrading from Rome Odunze to Drake London, which is a pretty significant upgrade. I've got Drake London as my wide receiver 12, Rome Odunze's wide receiver 19. One thing that would really impact how I would evaluate this trade is, what do these two teams look like going into next year? How big is the difference between, just projected, and we don't know this for sure, between that 2026 first and that 2026 second? Are we talking about just like these are true mystery box situations where you just don't really know how good these teams are going to be? In that situation, let's see, I've got a 2026 first. I got the trade chart right here. 2026 first. It's worth about 10 points on the trade chart. A second's not worth much at all this far in advance, assuming it's just a generic one. So let's just call it a 10-point difference. My difference between London at 23.7 on the trade chart and Rome Odunze at 18. It seems like you're giving up a little bit too much to make that upgrade. But if you are if you have a really good roster and you think you're going to have a really late pick next year, then it's quite possible that it works out okay. I would rather have London than Odunze. If this is a situation of a contender trading with a rebuilder, then I like it quite a bit, because the difference between that 2026 first and the 2026 second may not be that big at all. I think we have one more question from the chat here before we wrap things up. Dancy has a 10-team super flex, just won the league. Congratulations. Wide receivers are Justin Jefferson, Rashee Rice, Brian Thomas Jr. I see why you won the league. DJ Moore, Chris Olave, Brandon Ayuk. He's got James Cook, Connor, Spears, ETN. Has the 110. Has a question about how to go about improving running backs. It might be as simple as just throwing a couple of darts at 110 and with your second round pick on a couple of these running backs, and one of them just turns into a starter. The thing when I look at this is that I would kind of be thinking about, is there a way that I could use Brandon Ayuk and the 110 to move up in this draft to get a more sure thing at the running back position? If I can't do that, then my next angle would be what veteran running backs can I get for Ayuk, or what veteran running backs can I get for the 110? Now, again, I'm wanting to buy at a discount, so I'm buying a veteran running back with 110. It's got to be somebody I think is going to be like one of the top 6 or 7 running backs next year. But if I'd be looking to use those two pieces, the 110 and Brandon Ayuk, to see if I could get a veteran running back or move up to get into what I would say is probably the top 6 picks, is where I would view the cutoffs most likely going to be. It's Genty, it's Hampton, it's Henderson. I like Devin Neal a lot, but he's probably going to be at the end of that tier, maybe at the top of the next tier. Judkins could be somebody you might be able to get at 110, depending on where he goes in the draft. There's so many running backs in this draft class. And that's a good thing because there's a lot of opportunities. It's also a bad thing because we're going to see some guys that should be day 2 picks that fall to day 3 or fall to UFAs. We're going to see some guys that get drafted in a situation we'd like to see them as starters, and maybe even one of those top 6 I just mentioned that actually ends up in a Trey Benson situation. So if you're really a true contender, maybe the better angle is to use Ayuk and the 110 to try to go get a veteran, a really, really good veteran. Trade one of those pieces. That's going to do it for the one-man mailbag. As I mentioned, I've got my pre-combine top 12 rookies coming out later this week. On Friday, we're going to try to do at least a 1 round, maybe 1.5 rounds of a rookie mock draft, just to see where everybody's at on this class. And then next week, we will be back to Tuesdays and Fridays. In fact, we'll be Friday this week. So I guess we will talk to you on Friday.